Hey managers, when are you going to use Agile? Do you know when you should use Agile and when you shouldn't use Agile? Would you like to know? Stay tuned, I'm going to tell you. There are really two available approaches for projects. One is plan-driven, you might know that as a waterfall or a traditional way, or Agile, the so-called Agile approach, where we take an iterative and incremental approach, little bit at a time. Let's look first of all at the plan-driven approach. And that's all about, I know what I'm going to do, I know what the end is, and I'm going to work backwards towards that. So the plan-driven approach says, I start with the end in mind, I work backwards, I look at all the things that might go wrong in the course of that, and I plan, I mitigate for those. Good example, as good as any really, is building a house. You know what the house is going to look like. You've probably got some drawings and artist's impressions. You've had a structural architect do the stress calculations, and you share the plans with your builder, and off you go. The sort of risks and problems that you've got are you can't really pour concrete if the temperature drops too low. So what would you do to mitigate that? What about if you run out of concrete? How deep are the foundations going to have to be? And all of these are known problems. They're knowable in advance. Also, there's best practice. There's sort of guidance. People know how to get round these sorts of problems. This is a type of situation or a problem whereby the way that we reach the solution is very well controlled, or is best controlled really, through a detailed plan. Where Agile might be the best approach is when you're working towards a solution where that solution itself is not known in advance. Now, typically this is something that is unique. In type of solutions where Agile is appropriate, the discovery of that solution is typically incrementally produced. And just to stay with building a house metaphor just for a moment longer, although I don't really like building metaphors when we're talking about software development. Getting planning permission might be something that you would want to manage in an agile way, because really you don't know what sort of objections are going to be raised or by whom, or how you're going to have to work around those. You're not going to know how long it's going to take to get planning permission, and you don't know what adjustments you're going to have to make in order to get it. But you know that over time, what you want is planning permission. So the outcome is known, but the way that we're going to get to it is not known. We can have a pretty good attempt at saying, I'm going to submit some plans and the committee will meet and hopefully they will approve it. But you just don't know what's going to happen in that committee room. And for this reason, iterative and incremental approach best. Now, iterative normally means that cycle of plan, do, check. And that's a sort of a cycle that we're very familiar with. Incremental means building on top, but building things that are complete and ready to go. And when we're breaking things down in a plan-driven way, which we do, of course, because that is the best way to do a big project, is break it down into smaller bits. Sometimes it's okay, or it's very common, for those small pieces to have dependencies and just wait for those dependencies. And the Agile approach will try and avoid that and make sure that each increment of work is fully complete and does not have to be revisited. When we're thinking about a project, we have to manage the expectations of the stakeholders. This stakeholder wants somewhere to sit, and a simple three-legged stool is going to do that very well. As the owner of the stool or the user of the stool becomes more familiar with the stool and sees other, their expectations may increase and they want something fancier and looks better. And therefore this chair has got two jobs to do. One is it's a place to sit down, but the other is it's there to impress people. It's there to show what great taste you had. So therefore, before we jump to a solution, we need to understand what sort of problem this is. And we can do that by what job does it have to do? And how will we know when that is done? Now, with the three-legged stool, it's done when a sturdy stool is built and I can sit on it. But with the aesthetic chair, it has to be sturdy enough for me to sit on, but it has to look good enough for me to go, I like that. And that's a different requirement and one that's much harder to test. That's where we might iteratively and incrementally managing that risk. So typically you would do drawings first. And if the stakeholder approved the drawing, then you go on to the next stage of building it. So let's look at problems, because we're starting to see that it's understanding the type of problem that matters a lot in deciding your approach to managing the project. I'm hungry. Now I know the outcome here is going to be when I'm no longer hungry, then that problem will have been addressed. The solution will have addressed the problem. And I've got lots of options here and they're all pretty easy. I can eat a snack, bag of crisps, sandwich. I can go get some lunch with other people, go and look in the fridge, see what's in there. So lots of sort of ready-made, easily accessed options. The next one, we've heard people in the red team are complaining, they're unhappy. So what could we do? We could go along and validate, we could listen and try to fix whatever the problems are, or better still, collaborate with the team and work with them. Or we could take the approach that says, it doesn't really matter how unhappy you are, this project is really important and you're going to have to get it done. Now that does send a message that says the project matters more than the way you guys feel. And maybe that's true and maybe we could live with that. But what we don't have is key information. Finally, one of our trading desks in India, the dealers want to be able to trade euro bonds. They've got customers, and could we add them to our existing trading system? We know that this is a sort of thing that we've done before. So this sounds like just building another house, because we've built houses and we've done that in different places. And in this case, we've added euro bonds into the Hong Kong trading desk, and we've done it in Australia. So strongly tempted to copy and paste that plan. It's just another one of those. But then there's another approach that says when we did that work in Hong Kong, there were a few things that we didn't know that we only found out after we tried to go live. There were some complications there that we didn't really know about, to do with compliance and to do with international regulation. So because of that, maybe what we should do is really understand the compliance side and the requirements, all of those different stakeholders. We're based in the UK and we're trading in India and it's European bonds. So which are the authorities that are involved and what are the regulations that are going to apply? We really need to do a lot more work to gather that information. And hopefully what you're seeing is we need to get information, even if it's going to the fridge and having a look to see what there is that I can eat. So now let's look again at those same problems, thinking about the information and thinking about the outcomes that are going to achieve. First of all, I'm certainly going to eat. And once I've looked in the fridge and spoken to people around me to see if anybody else wants to eat, then I've got all the information, I can make a decision. So this is a problem which we could classify as obvious. It's an obvious problem to which the solution is going to be simple. There's lots of simple solutions that I can just throw at this problem. Next one, I'm going to go and talk to the team, because that's the only way I can get enough information to make a decision. The decision might be that I need still more information. But here the outcome is not certain. Maybe there's a risk to the project. Maybe I have to take the project and move it to a different team. Or maybe there's something wrong with the project. Or there's a problem with the stakeholders. So I don't know any of that. It may well be they will be able to deliver. So there's lots of uncertainty here about the outcome. Here we could say that we've got uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. And we've got ambiguity. We don't really know what the problem is and whether we can fix it or not. So this is going to be discovering a little bit. This needs an iteration to go and get some information. From that information, we'll maybe plan an action, and that'll tell us what the next step might need to be. So this we can classify as a complex problem. Something that's a bit of a giveaway for a complex problem is, given the same situation, we may not get the same outcome. The same team with the same project a month from now or a year ago may not have been complaining. The world of complexity, humans very often have complex behavior. You don't get repeatability. And then the last one, this is very clear what's going to happen at the end of this project, that we're going to be offering euro bonds out of Mumbai. So there's a lot of ambiguity around the regulatory and the compliance aspects. There could be other things as well. There could be local traditions and customs and all sorts of things. There's certainly different currencies involved. So we just don't know anything about that. The right thing to do is to get experts in and get more information from those experts. And once we've got that, then we can start to use plans because we know the technical requirements. We know how to do this technically. What we don't know is the local details for this implementation. So that we can classify as a complicated type of problem. So already we got these three problem domains. If I've got something that's an obvious one, let's give you a businessy example. A small business, I want to automate my tax returns and my VAT and my accounting. The obvious thing to do is just buy an off-the-shelf package that's going to let me do it. And if I don't like it, I'll just change it and buy a different one. In the complex world, it's going to be iterative and incremental because I don't know enough, and the things that I'm going to find out are going to tell me what to do next, but then I'll have to try those things and see if they move us forward, and if not, I'll have to try something else. So there's lots of complexity, lots of loosely coupled stakeholders here. So I've got some quite high risks. For this one, I'm going to take very much the agile approach, a little bit at a time, so iterative and incremental. I'm going to see what happens, see what I can find out this week, make some decisions, make some changes, see what I can do next week, see if the team is happier about it, see where we are. You might think about this one as course correcting, constantly course correcting. And finally, trading euro bonds from Mumbai. It's very clear what we need to do here is we need to get more information. And once we've got that information, we're probably going to be able to implement a plan-driven approach, because this is just another one of those. To summarize, you as a manager very often will have to decide the control mechanism that you're going to use for a project. Will it be an agile control mechanism, iterative and incremental, or will it be a plan-driven type of management? And what we've seen is the first thing to do is work out what type of problem it is before you do anything else. If it's an obvious problem, stop there, just throw some simple solutions at it. And if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter, throw another simple solution. You'll learn just by finding out why the first solution didn't work. You'll learn more about the problem, and you'll also know what would be a better solution. It might be that you discover that the problem that you at first thought was obvious isn't, it's more complicated. And that's fine, because then all you need to do is get some experts in that have got specialist knowledge, and they can get the information that they need, present some options which you can select. Another characteristic of complicated is anything that we see as being mass produced or volume produced or scale, that's going to be complicated. And you're going to need the plans in detail as to what each piece is going to look like and how you're going to manufacture it, so that you can then build that at scale. So that tends to indicate complicated. And then we've got the complex domain. Humans, when human activity is involved, could well be complex because humans behave slightly differently in different circumstances. If you've got loosely coupled groups of people with different agendas, different requirements, different expectations, that might indicate complexity. So there, what we want to do is avoid solutions until you've agreed what it is that the outcome is going to do. What job does it need to do? And how will we test that? That requires a lot of collaboration between those stakeholders. There's a lot of negotiation because everybody will want their own ideal. So in a complex domain, you're going to get collaboration between disparate stakeholders. They've all got their own ideals, but you find a common ground. Very much like the idea of placing something in the middle between the stakeholders, and let's agree what this is. And a good way to do that is, what is the job to be done? What does this thing need to do? Well, it just needs to trade euro bonds from the Mumbai office. And then everything else is detail about that. You have to avoid solutioneering. And that's really important because the what is to do with the problem domain and the how is to do with the solution domain. And remember, we are staying in the problem side. Solution is something that's going to be developed by the experts, in this case, a software development team. So avoid solutioneering. So that's 3 types of problems. Your homework, there's 2 parts to it. First of all, is a bit of gentle reading. It's Dave Snowden introduced the Kinefin framework. And in this article, which was published in the Harvard Business Review, he frames it as a leader's framework for decision making. And it's the same approach, really, is decide what type of problem you're dealing with. And once you know the problem type, you'll know what sort of decisions you have to make. I've spoken about 3 of the 5 domains Dave writes about. And firstly, the simple domain is now called the obvious domain. The obvious domain, problem domain, has simple solutions. That and the complicated domain form the ordered world, whereas complex and what Dave's called chaotic, that's unordered. Then your other piece of homework is this one. I'd like you to think about these types of problems. And again, just classify them into whether you think they are obvious, complicated, complex, or something else. I'm tempted to not provide any answers to these. You're going to have to contact me with your ideas for what you think. Just write them in the comments. Let's see.